The rumor of collapse always sounds distant until it whistles through your own windows. By the time Donald Trump's pen scratched across the April order, the world he aimed to discipline was already walking away. On live streams, you could see European ministers blinking like dazed boxers, Canadians rolling down shutters along the Ambassador Bridge, Mexican soldiers welding crude barricades at San Isidro, while journalists cheered in Mandarin from drone feeds overhead. A week later, PayPal's global portals froze like museum pieces, and a day after that, the first ruptured gas mains turned the twilight skyline of Chicago into a flickering row of funeral candles. Sarah Collins felt each tremor in the pediatric wing of what used to be Detroit Mercy Hospital. She was 27, a trauma-trained nurse who carried a stethoscope in one pocket and her 4-year-old son Milo's inhaler in the other. Before hyperinflation devoured every digit on the pharmacy monitors, she had trusted the steady rhythm of supply drops from CVS trucks, oxygen tanks, epinephrine injectors, the anti-seizure meds Milo needed since birth. Now the CVS logo was just another ripped vinyl sheet flapping in the wind above an empty loading dock. When her shift ended, Sarah collected half a dozen discarded Tesla Powerwall packs, rigged them to the ward's failing generators, and whispered a useless prayer that Elon Musk's distant livestream promises were flying supercharger skids to every major hospital, weren't just PR smoke swirling across a dying bandwidth. Downtown, life had already shape-shifted into its leaner, crueler form. Cadillac Escalades once leased by executive commuters now idled in warlord convoys, their rear windows sheeted with armor steel cut from gutted office roofs. BMW sedans, built for Germanic precision, rattled along pothole boulevards as taxi ambulances, trailing for poles through shattered sunroofs. Street kids in counterfeit Nike hoodies hustled battery swaps beneath the rusted Louis Vuitton signage that dangled over Woodward Avenue like a broken chandelier. The electronic zeros on whiskey shelves evaporated faster than the liquor itself. A half-liter flask of Jack Daniels fetched 2 days of groceries, but groceries had become a myth, a story parents told to hush hungry toddlers at dusk. Every night Sarah retreated to the narrow apartment she once shared with Milo and her husband Devin, who had been drafted into a National Guard detachment somewhere near the smoldering Ohio rail lines. The apartment lights flickered on bootleg current spliced from derelict street lamps. She scrolled through encrypted neighborhood channels, scanning for the commodity that now meant life or death, albuterol cartridges. Each message thread read like a ransom note. I'll trade 1 carton formula for 2 vials insulin. Need anti-epileptics. Will swap solar converter. But as weeks blurred, even contraband supply wagons stopped arriving. The new Axis flotillas had sewn a steel hem around the continent, choking every port from Boston to Long Beach. One drizzling dawn, a Tesla semi, paint scorched and logos blacked out, growled up to Mercy's loading bay. Its lone driver, a lanky kid with John Deere ear protectors for headphones, shoved a data slate into Sarah's glove-stained hand. Manifest: 6 pallets of expired cold chain vaccines, 2 crates of saline, and Miracle 20 boxes of ventilator propellant, albuterol included. In bold, someone had scrawled, "Last Mile Volunteer Convoy, Phoenix Manifest Delta." The kid flashed a nervous grin. "Drive safe, ma'am. Border militias shoot first these days." Then he was gone, tires screaming west toward the shattered I-94 ramp. Sarah inventoried the shipment inside the dim pharmacy hall. The vaccines were useless, their coolant long thawed, but the inhaler canisters were gold. And yet 20 boxes meant maybe 3 weeks for the city's wheezing children. She pictured Milo's chest hitching for air and knew waiting for the next miracle truck was a death wish. If Detroit kids were going to breathe through June, the medicine had to be moved by people who cared more than politicians did. That evening she found herself in what used to be a Cadillac showroom, now the clandestine headquarters of the 8 Mile Mechanics. An eclectic tribe of ex-rideshare drivers, union long haulers, and street racers who had stripped electric cars down to their copper bones and rebuilt them into mutant hybrids. Solar-skin roof panels, reclaimed BMW battery clusters, side panels layered with scrap Kevlar peeled off abandoned police cruisers. They talked in acronyms: SOC, torque curves, thermal bleed, and they talked fast because curfew squads prowled the night behind polycarbonate shields. Sarah laid the inhaler case on an oil-stained blueprint table. "I have 20 boxes," she said, voice steadier than she felt. That's enough for 100 children for 3 weeks. I need them in Cleveland, Indianapolis, Louisville, and back here before the next heat wave hits. She pushed a maple leaf stamped ration chip across the table, a symbolic gesture given that Canada's border was hermetically sealed. What I don't have, she continued, is a road. Roads are histories, muttered Jax Porter, a squat engineer with jack-o'-lantern tattoos curling up his neck. Bridges are mined. Ohio rivers under 24/7 drone watch. You can't outrun satellites. Sarah pointed at the map. Satellites don't see underground. Storm sewers, dry canal beds, service tunnels still exist. We stitch them into one pipeline and move faster than the sensors can predict. Pipeline. Jax rolled the word around his tongue like bourbon. What do you call this operation? Corridor for the living, she said, surprising herself with the conviction ringing in her chest. But it won't stay alive without wheels. A hush settled over the mechanic's bunker. Then a thin smile cracked Jax's face. I've got a pair of retrofitted Escalades with silent drive hubs and solar reinforcements. Problems, Juice. Batteries run dry after 200 clicks. Swap packs every 100, Sarah replied. Cash stations in derelict PayPal data centers. They still have emergency solar arrays. 2 hours tops each pit stop. We move at dusk. We shelter by dawn. We never light up the sky. Arguments erupted, logistics, guard posts, petrol gangs, the rumor that Russian recon squads had landed near Erie with hybrid hovercraft. But by midnight, the schematic emerged. A looping figure eight that skirted official roadblocks via drainage grids and railroad cuts, refueling on scavenged Tesla megapacks guarded by sympathetic pastors and ex-teachers. Each safe house marked with a crude spray paint code, a child's open hand. Inside 24 hours, the mechanics welded roof baskets, reinforced battery housings, and spray-painted matte ash across every reflective surface. Sarah located a stash of Nike Moisture Seal ponchos and Louis Vuitton duffels, absurdly luxurious but stitched from bullet-resistant threads. They stuffed them with gauze, antivirals, surgical needles. When Jax handed Sarah a battered Jack Daniels flask for nerves, she shook her head, then slipped it into the console anyway. Fire had its uses. On a moon-haze Thursday, the convoy rolled out. 2 Cadillac Ghosts gliding beside a gutted BMW iX repurposed as a comms jammer, plus a tailgunner bike whose rider wore a hacked Oculus visor streaming thermal sweeps of rooftops ahead. Sarah rode shotgun in the lead Escalade, stethoscope coiled like a silver serpent across her chest, Milo's inhaler pressed against her palm. The city's perimeter lights shivered in their death throes behind her. She whispered to no one, "Hold on, kiddo. Mom's bringing the air." The first leg sliced beneath the overgrown remains of I-75, pavement buckled like tectonic plates, then plunged into a forgotten canal running parallel to the Maumee River. Tree-limb shadows flickered across their windshields. Somewhere above, drones buzzed like distant thunderflies. At the edge of Toledo, a derelict CVS outlet greeted them with neon letters half alive, "V," flickering in the humid dark. Inside, looters had emptied most shelves, though a lone security bot still patrolled, sputtering ancient corporate slogans. The convoy ghosted past, engines whisper quiet, and Sarah felt the surreal wash of consumer nostalgia. Aisle signs advertising shampoo and sunscreen while the Republic itself peeled like cheap laminate. Near midnight, they reached the first cache point, a PayPal redundancy bunker carved into a limestone bluff. Solar racks still tilted toward a faint moonlight, trickling slow amps into Tesla megapacks. Jax's crew executed the battery swap with pit crew precision. Sarah recalibrated blood coolant boxes and triple-sealed the inhaler crates. Forward scouts reported no heat signatures within a 3-mile radius. Yet just as they reboard, Milo's face flashed on Sarah's cracked wrist pad. Devin had found a way to ping her through a military sat phone relay. Only one line came through before the signal shredded. "Hold. Southern corridor unsafe. Trust no lights south of Mansfield. Love you both." She swallowed the surge of fear and keyed the quick code response. "On mission. See you home." Whether the message left Earth, she would never know. At dawn's gray edge, the convoy threaded into the rural intestines of Ohio, Where cornfields had become bramble seas and farmhouses flew improvised flags. White for neutrality, red for help, black for stay away. Sarah stared out at the sagging barns and wondered how many other mothers listened to their children wheeze, while field radios crackled with reports of armored trains rolling east under Russian banners. Somewhere far across the Atlantic, diplomats bargained over siege lines drawn on napkins stained with espresso. Here, survival hinged on a grease-smudged map and a half-dozen mechanics who believed in a woman's promise. Mid-morning, the jammer BMW detected a spike of encrypted chatter, frequency blocks tagged to private PMC contractors rumored to guard the Columbia gas pipelines. The convoy detoured down an abandoned scenic byway, oak roots tearing through the asphalt like arthritic fingers. Birdsong filled the cabin, shockingly ordinary. Then in the side mirror, Sarah watched the rear bike throttle sideways, its rider slicing a Molotov arch into the lap of an armored rover cresting the hill. Flames blossomed. The rover's turret coughed in frustration, electronics blind. Pulse pounding, Sarah swung forward as dust enveloped their convoy, engines surging into the hush of a Forest Service track. When the dust cleared, the rover sat crippled on the road, hatch blown open, mercenaries scattered unconscious. One clutched an embossed patch, Silver Eagle under a corporate crown. Private security, no flag, no allegiance. Sarah felt no triumph, only the hollow ache of acceleration. Every mile they outran, the war behind them multiplied like Hydra heads. She thought of Milo asleep under city-issued blackout drapes, air monitor blinking yellow, his small chest rising in fragile increments bought by borrowed time. They crossed the Indiana line beneath a rust-seamed trestle at twilight, slipping through a tunnel of kudzu where insects sang electronic lullabies. Battery levels skimmed critical, but ahead lay a half-collapsed Tesla dealership rumored to shelter a preacher who stockpiled energy cells with missionary zeal. If they reached him, Louisville would be within striking distance, and from there Sarah could loop north with fresh inhalers before Milo's dwindled supply bottomed out. If they failed, the corridor would become another lost rumor, a brave whisper swallowed by the continental blackout. As stars kindled in the exhaust-colored sky, Sarah gripped the wheel, felt the tremor of a world rewriting its rules beneath her tires, and drove on. The kudzu tunnel spat the convoy onto a frontage road that looked like the cracked tongue of some ancient beast, and for 10 breath-held seconds Sarah believed they might simply glide the last 2 miles to the preacher's refuge. Then the sky flickered, the brief, sour yellow pulse of a battlefield laser sweeping low. Somewhere overhead a drone operator flagged the anomaly of 3 silent Cadillacs ghosting along a corridor the satellites marked non-passable. A second flash stitched the asphalt 50 feet ahead, carving molten punctuation into the night. Electric motors screamed, the jammer BMW dropped its band-spoofing payload like chaff, and the world blurred sideways. Jax fishtailed the lead Escalade around a toppled billboard whose peeling vinyl still promised, "Experience the future, Cadillac Lyric." Sarah crushed her shoulder against the door as the SUV clipped a fire hydrant stump, throwing sparks. Behind them the second Escalade pivoted, iron-bristled tires chewing gravel while the comms car accelerated into a sacrificial sprint, drawing the drone's targeting cone wide. Inside her chest Sarah could hear Milo's thin, quick breaths, half memory, half omen. She forced herself to breathe slower, think clearer. They found the preacher in the shell of the Tesla showroom, exactly where rumor said he'd be, kneeling before a supercharger cabinet, palms pressed to the plastic as though it were an altar. Fanatical light danced in his eyes, equal parts lithium glow and pure, stubborn faith. Rows of Model Y husks formed pews, hoods up like supplicant mouths. He rose when the Cadillacs rolled in, coat flaring to reveal a clerical collar sewn from a shredded Louis Vuitton scarf. "Welcome to the Book of Charge," he intoned, then saw the bullet-gouged bumpers and changed tone. "Confession later. Batteries first." While mechanics swapped depleted packs for triple-stacked power wall bricks, Sarah hurried to the preacher's back office, now a triage nook lit by whiskey bottle lanterns. For patients lay on makeshift cots, a pregnant woman clawing at her belly for morphine, a geriatric vet humming an off-key anthem, 2 farm teens bandaged to the eyebrows after a grain silo blast. They needed more than albuterol, but tonight albuterol was what she had. She ignored the burn in her own muscles and dosed inhalers, checked pulses, taped gauze. Overhead, artillery drones still prowled. The preacher flicked a touchscreen concealed under his pulpit. On a corrugated steel monitor appeared a hex-mapped mosaic of the Midwest lit by pulsing red circles. Pirate outfit calls itself the Liberty Restoration Force, mercs hired by whoever can still pay in crypto. He tapped a crimson blotch sliding south from Indianapolis. They've cracked old PayPal vaults raiding accounts of the dead. They want your meds. PayPal again, Sarah thought bitterly. Even corpses couldn't close their wallets. Can you patch through Starlink? She asked. Need weather sweeps, drone traffic, anything. He spread helpless hands. Elon's birds are being jammed by Russian Skynets over Chicago. We ride blind. Ride anyway, she nearly said, but the hum of motors signaled the swap was done. Outside, Jax had the crews reloading boxes, layering them beneath tarps dyed the same dun color as the interstate filth. Sarah folded the preacher's rough hand into hers, left 3 inhaler canisters behind, and sprinted for the car. Steam hissed from the supercharger racks like incense as the convoy rolled back into purgatory. They took the southern bypass around Louisville because the downtown bridges were mined and the knobs of Oldham County had become guerrilla country. It was dawn when they slid into the shadow of a limestone quarry, engines cut, final approach on foot. Louisville's skyline, a ragged EKG of half-lit towers, flickered across the Ohio River like a mirage. They would cross under the city via a forgotten freight tunnel whose blueprints Jax had stolen from the Library of Congress servers months before the shutdown. But first, the guards. 2 of them, rail-thin men in patched BMW service coveralls, lounged against a makeshift checkpoint. Their rifles were antique M4 models, but the landmine grid surrounding them was painfully modern. Sarah stepped forward, stethoscope glinting like a badge. Pediatric meds, she said, voice pitched to carry. Trade for diesel, solar sheets, whatever keeps wheels turning. The smaller guard spat. We don't deal in prayers. She pulled out the Jack Daniels flask, flipped the cap, and let the oaky scent bloom in the humid air. Even from 5 paces she could see the man's pupils flex. Barter was language, whiskey was grammar. Before he could answer, a piston thud echoed from the quarry rim and a white flare arced overhead, illuminating everything in surgical glare. Not drones this time, mortar scouts. Events accelerated into chaos. The larger guard fired wild at the cliff, mines chirped alive, and Sarah Dove feeling gravel rip skin through her jeans. Jax's mechanics opened suppression fire with home-machined coil guns. One mine erupted in a geyser of earth and bone. Shrapnel whined past her ear. For a breathless heartbeat, Sarah watched the near-headless body of the small guard slump, flask still clutched and fingers gone instantly slack. Jack Daniels drained into the dust like wasted absolution. The flare burned out. Silence returned, ruined and echoing. Jax hauled her to her feet. We move now or we never move. They dragged the guardhouse aside, defused the remaining mines with frantic wire snips, and funneled the Cadillacs into the yawning throat of the freight tunnel. Concrete swallowed them in damp darkness, water dripped from stalactites like a metronome counting down the old world's final measures. In the passenger seat, Sarah slumped, adrenaline spent, whispering a cadence of still alive, still alive. She could almost taste Milo's inhaler mist on her tongue, phantom cool and life-saving. Louisville's undercity felt like trespassing inside someone else's skeleton. Sub-basements connected to boiler catacombs which connected to storm culverts big enough to echo entire sermons. They followed faded spray paint arrows, a forgotten homeless network guide, to a maintenance ramp that climbed toward University Hospital. Sunlight knifed through a vertical blade. They surfaced amid shattered ambulances and toppled gurneys. Doctors greeted them with hollow eyes. Half the pediatric ward had relocated into parking decks where car lifts doubled as 4 stands. When Sarah opened the first crate, a sound rose, a torn chorus of relief, grief, disbelief. She moved from cot to cot, pressing inhalers into tiny fists, listening to raspy lungs stutter then smooth. The clean hiss of medicine sliced through the hospital's heavy air like birdsong returning to a bombed forest. While she worked, Jax organized recharging. The hospital's heliostat array still tracked sun thanks to an old Tesla firmware that ignored broken government certificates. Panels sparkled and batteries drank. Yet rumors seeped in. Liberty Restoration Force scouts had followed the mortar strike, sweeping the bypass in armored Ford Raptors equipped with infrared scopes, BMW police units deserting to whichever paycheck promised power. Time as ever was the enemy. By dusk they offloaded the last of the Louisville supplies. Hospital staff gifted them 2 crates of antibiotics in exchange, plus a single slender data drive, telemetry on emerging cholera pockets along the Mississippi. St. Louis is drowning in dysentery, a physician warned. Cache those files somewhere safe. If any central authority resurfaces, that data will be gold. Central Authority, Sarah thought, eyeing the fractured Capitol dome on a muted hallway TV replaying archival footage of Donald Trump's inauguration redux, crowds cheering, red hats bobbing like blood cells in an angry river. He was still giving speeches from the barricaded West Wing, promising tariff victory while the nation thinned to a whisper. His face looked older now, sagging under digital makeup, yet his voice boomed with the same old certainty. She switched the set off. They rolled out under cover of thunderclouds. Next target, Indianapolis, a wide loop north to hit remaining safe houses before curving home. The Bluetooth chatter was frantic tonight. Someone claimed Elon Musk had launched emergency dirigibles packed with solar microgrids from a secret Baja site. Someone else said Musk had been arrested after Tesla Shanghai defected to Beijing. Truth never survived beyond a single county these days. Sarah filed it under background noise. In the convoy's rear Escalade, a new passenger rode shotgun. Brother Thomas, the Tesla preacher, summoned by his own convictions to minister along the route. He clutched a battered King James Bible whose margins were thick with solar schematics. He spoke rarely, but when they coasted through stretches of absolute dark, he sang soft hymns that bounced inside the SUV's cabin until they felt like warm breath on cold skin. Indiana farmland unfolded beneath storm flashes. Sirens in the distance, or maybe wolves. Highway signage had been repurposed into propaganda, where the hat or starve, spray-painted in alt-right fonts. Beneath, some brave soul had scrawled a counter-slogan in Nike swooshes, "Just run." Sarah tasted iron in her mouth, realized she had bitten her lip thinking of Milo. She'd left him with Nurse Ortega in Detroit, generator humming, a single Tesla power wall between him and suffocating night. 48 hours, Ortega had warned. Maybe 60 if they rationed. Sarah checked the elapsed timer. 31 hours gone. She needed to be far closer to home than she was. The corridor plan called for Cleveland next, but satellite interference forced a recalculation. They would cut diagonally northeast, hugging state parks where canopy cover hid thermal signatures, then leapfrog charging caches to Napoleon, Ohio, where a disused PayPal server farm supposedly still pulsed with backup juice. From there, Detroit, one last sprint. They made it halfway to Muncie before the rain began, fat, gritty drops infused with industrial ash swept east by jet stream anomalies. Visibility zeroed out. Jacks throttled back, but hydroplaning sent the rear Cadillac skidding sideways into a jackknifed semi. Metal screamed, antibiotics crates exploded across the tarmac like dice. Sarah's head slammed the dashboard, stars burst behind her eyes, then darkness closed for a count of 5. She woke to Brother Thomas chanting over her, Bible pressed to her forehead like a cool stone. Outside, Jax and 2 mechanics salvaged what remained while quadcopters buzzed overhead, their searchlights skittering across puddled asphalt. Not ours, Sarah realized, the Liberty Mercs. They had finally triangulated the coil gun signature from the quarry firefight. With the rear Escalade crippled, the convoy had shrunk to 2 vehicles, 1 battery swap short of Napoleon. Strip everything non-essential, Sarah ordered, voice raw. Meds, power bricks, weapons. We load the lead car and the jammer. We drive until the wheels rot. Jax nodded, set to work. They ditched seats, door panels, even the floor mats. The Louis Vuitton duffels went last, tough but heavy. Brother Thomas hesitated, then tore the LV patches from his coat and tossed the rest on the roadside bonfire. Luxury had no place on the corridor tonight. Rain eased before dawn, leaving the world smelling of wet circuitry. They pushed north, nursing kilowatts, silencing every electronic ping. Sarah kept one eye on Milo's timer, 37 hours, 38. Her skin buzzed with caffeine and fear. An hour outside Napoleon, the jammer died with a soft whine, batteries dry. Moments later, a sky drone locked on, spotlighting them like stage performers. A fusillade of tungsten darts chewed the road. Jax veered, clipping a guardrail, tire burst. Momentum skidded them into a soybean field, stalks slapping the windshield in green frenzy. Sarah braced Milo's inhaler between her teeth and screamed, hold. They plowed to a halt 18 rows in. Drone rotors chopped overhead, searchlight scanning for confirmation of kill. Jax popped the hood, yanked a copper coil free, and jammed it across the battery terminals. The car died completely, no heat signature at all. In the sudden hush, rainwater dripped from stalk to stalk like subdued applause. Searchlight swept once more, lingered, then moved on. Minutes later, the drone drifted west, bored or summoned elsewhere. Sarah exhaled. Jax rewired the coil, brought minimal power back online. Estimated range, 30 miles. Napoleon sat at 28. They limped onto a county road as dawn's first graphite smear edged the horizon. Farmhouses passed like ghosts. Finally, the PayPal facility, a monolith of mirrored glass half-shattered, its logo scorched into unreadable graffiti. Yet inside, emergency LEDs still pulsed faintly. Backup hydrogen cells untouched because no one remembered how to hack the old two-factor locks. Jax remembered. Within minutes, racks hummed alive, Cadillac screens glowed, and the inverter fed electrons like a thirsty river. Sarah stood in the atrium amid the soft blue hum and allowed herself 60 seconds of stillness. She messaged Nurse Ortega, ETA 10 hours. Keep him breathing. No reply came, but the message flag turned green, delivered. Hope, the stupid, stubborn thing, flickered again. With batteries brimmed, they set the NAV array, now offline, to satellites, but local inertial still worked. Detroit, 200 miles. They would drive nonstop, refuel only if a miracle storage unit appeared by the roadside. A single misfire, one roadblock, and Milo would count his last breaths alone. Sarah climbed into the Escalade, placed the Jack Daniels flask, now emptied of whiskey and filled with sterilizing ethanol, beside her, and cinched the belt. Brother Thomas slid Bible pages into the visor, verses about chariots of fire and wheels within wheels. Jax keyed the silent drive. The Cadillac rolled forward, headlights off, a metal prayer whispered across asphalt. The Pontiac Lake Road unwound before them like a half-remembered lullaby, a ribbon of cracked concrete bordered by birch skeletons that glowed in pre-dawn ash blue. Moisture fumed off the still-warm hood, coiling across the windshield until it looked as though the Escalade itself were sighing. Sarah kept her battered wrist pad angled beneath the dashboard light, watching Milo's oxygen statistics update in stuttering increments, 76% saturation creeping down like a leaky faucet. 43 hours of generator life, the last power wall gulping amperage at hospital pace. She imagined her son's small hand reaching for the inhaler mouthpiece, nurses whispering "You're okay, sweetie," while the ward murmured with dying monitors. Every number on the screen felt like a thumb pressed to her windpipe. Jax drove with a kind of sacred stillness, the wheel barely shifting under calloused fingers. Occasionally he muttered torque percentages, battery temps, but it sounded more like prayer than engineering. Brother Thomas hummed in the back seat, dismantling and reassembling a single-action pistol in darkness and quoting Isaiah about swords beaten into plowshares, an irony so heavy Sarah could almost taste the metallic tang of it. By the time they crossed into Monroe County, the sky was a purse-colored bruise and the air smelled of lake rot. They passed an abandoned BMW service center whose facade had been repurposed into a refugee bulletin board, spray paint arrows pointing north to mythical safe zones, south to rumored barter markets. Someone had tagged a massive Nike swoosh across the entire second-story window. Below it, in fluorescent pink, was scrawled "Run faster than fear." Sarah whispered the words as they rolled by, her voice too thin to be heard over the hum of the motors. The last viable supercharger lay in a mall parking garage near an Arbor, a Tesla installation that once sucked luxury SUVs full for weekend football games. Now the mall was a hollow temple to vanished commerce. Jack Daniels ads peeled from the walls beside mold-specked Louis Vuitton banners and crushed PayPal kiosks. Solar arrays still fed trickles into a single functioning cabinet guarded by a crew of college dropouts wearing mismatched hockey pads and retrofitted BMW motorcycle helmets. Their captain called himself Zeds, a lanky kid carrying a Louisville Slugger wired to a cattle prod. Zeds wanted to trade kilowatt hours for antiviral meds. Sarah would have given them, she wanted to save everyone. But supply crates sat almost empty, the Cadillac's rear seats stacked to the ceiling with only what Detroit children required to keep breathing. She offered the data drive instead, cholera telemetry worth more than antibiotics in the long run. Zed squinted, evaluating, knowledge weighed differently these days. He accepted, waving the bat in a grand arc and instructing his crew to hook up 50 kilowatt hours free of drama. While they waited, Sarah drifted through the food court's spectral hush. Plastic palm trees bent under dust, a CVS signage strip, red letters on white, hung at a precarious angle like a jaw dislocated in mid-speech. Behind the shutter bars set aisles still labeled for cough syrups and prenatal vitamins, but stripped to metal bones. She closed her eyes, listening for the ghostly sound of price scanners. Nothing, only the distant hiss of charging cables feeding lithium into desperate lungs. Back at the Cadillac, she found Brother Thomas baptizing the front bumper with a fingertip cross of recycled coolant, murmuring that even miracles needed maintenance. Jack signaled 97% charge, good for the final sprint. They rolled out, engines whispering, as dawn unfurled across the freeway like fresh linen soaked in blood orange dye. Outside Ypsilanti, a convoy appeared in the rearview. 3 matte black Humvees stenciled with the Liberty Restoration Force Eagle pushing 80 miles an hour, their turrets glinting. Sarah's pulse rocketed. "If they land a tracker, we're done," she said. Jack slammed the accelerator, the Escalade surged forward with silent fury, electric torque peeling asphalt crumbs. Brother Thomas climbed through the sunroof, wedging himself against wind shear, pistol braced over the roofline. First shots came as green tracer arcs, chewing up lane reflectors. Sarah clutched Milo's inhaler copy, her talisman, then plunged fingers under the seat and yanked free the ethanol-filled Jack Daniels flask. She cracked the cap, tossed the liquid into a rag, and Brother Thomas, understanding instantly, lowered a lighter clip to his Bible pouch. Flame bloomed neon blue. She hurled the rag out the window, wind carried the torch onto the lead Humvee's windshield. A second later, the Humvee slewed sideways, blinded, colliding with its partner in a cacophony of armor plates and grinding axles. The third vehicle braked hard, turret swiveling, but Jack started the Cadillac down an exit ramp into an industrial corridor of warehouses and shipping depots. They plowed through a flex fence, motors humming over broken glass. Jack's cut power entirely 2 blocks in, they coasted behind a stack of rusting shipping containers. Silence smothered them like heavy velvet. Engines far off idled, then faded. LRF, unwilling to search a labyrinth of dead factories, motored back to the expressway. Sarah's pulse gradually steadied. Brother Thomas ducked back through the sunroof, eyes shining. "Blessed are the quick-witted," he said, seating himself with a grunt. Jack smiled without humor. "We burned a quarter charge pulling that stunt." "Enough," Sarah answered. 110 miles left. "We can coast half the way if we stick to the old rail grades." They navigated north along rusted tracks hemmed in by brush. Occasionally they jostled across buckled ties, each impact rattling crates. Mid-morning sunlight pierced foliage, painting the Cadillac's interior in flickering leaf mosaics. Brother Thomas dozed, pistol across his lap, lips moving in silent scripture. Jax's knuckles whitened on the wheel, fatigue at last showing through his grease-smudged calm. At the outskirts of Dearborn, they encountered the picketer wall, thousands of unemployed auto workers protesting tariffs gone rabid, now an armed commune straddling Michigan Avenue. They wore patchwork armor emblazoned with decades-old Union logos. Makeshift trebuchets stood sentinel, hurling scrap-brake rotors at any vehicle bold enough to approach. Sarah exited the Cadillac alone, hands raised. She faced a wall of men and women whose lives had been forged inside Ford Rouge, workers who saw in her Cadillac an icon of corporate betrayal. 100 children are suffocating in Detroit, Mercy, she said, voice hoarse. "I have medicine they need. Let us through." A burly foreman in stained Union blues stepped forward, hefting a crowbar. "Tariffs crushed our pensions. Why should your kids breathe if ours starve?" Sarah's throat trembled. She reached into her bag and produced Milo's backup inhaler. She set it on the asphalt between them. "My son needs this, but I'll trade you one for every 5 feet of road you clear. We have 27 left." A murmur rolled through the crowd. No mother barters her child's breath lightly, the authenticity was palpable. The foreman nodded once. Picketers hauled aside barricades. Sarah hurried back, instructing Jax to edge forward as she walked, handing out inhalers to families lining the route, each exchange a dagger twist in her ribs. 10 inhalers later, they slipped past the last trebuchet. Inside the car, Brother Thomas regarded Sarah with new, solemn respect. "Greater love hath no woman," he whispered. She didn't answer. Her math ran frantic. 17 inhalers sacrificed, still enough for Detroit if distribution was precise. An hour later the skyline materialized, Detroit's jagged crown rising from heat shimmer, many towers dark, others sparkling where unauthorized solar skins caught the afternoon sun. Smoke columns drifted over the riverfront where rumored Russia-backed militias policed the ports. Yet despite the ruin, the city looked almost tender to Sarah, like a battered parent waiting on a stoop for a prodigal child. They approached Mercy via backstreets plastered with shuttered Nike outlets and half-collapsed CVS clinics. Neighborhood kids darted through potholes, waggling finger guns and chanting slogans. When the Escalade rolled onto the hospital campus, generator exhaust mingled with blossoms of hydrangea pushing through sidewalk cracks, a surreal fragrance of diesel and springtime. Nurse Ortega rushed outside, eyes brimming. Milo's hanging on, but barely. CO2 threshold alarms every hour. They swept crates into gurney carts, nurses swarming like white-clad ants. Jax coordinated offloading while Sarah sprinted to pediatrics. She found Milo curled in a nest of blankets beneath a faded Louis Vuitton scarf, Ortega's attempt at comfort. His face was an unsettling shade of gray lavender. He peeked eyelids open, pupils huge and shining. "Mama," he gasped. The single word sounded like it traveled the length of 2 continents. Sarah snapped open a fresh inhaler, positioned the mask pressed. A soft cloud hissed, white as forgiveness. Milo inhaled, coughed, inhaled again. Color seeped back into cheeks too small to house so much courage. Sarah counted beats, 1 elephant, 2 elephant. His chest rose smoother, deeper. She sagged beside him, forehead resting against his tiny shoulder while silent sobs racked her. Outside, bedlam rose, the corridors fame racing through hallways, parents weeping, security scrambling to contain new crowds. Brother Thomas stood in the foyer reciting hymns over boxes while volunteers formed bucket brigade lines to the ICU. Jax collapsed onto a supply cart, eyes closed, grease-streaked face tilted to fluorescence like they were summer stars. Yet victory tasted brief. Dr. Abramovitz, the ward chief, cornered Sarah an hour later. Your meds save perhaps 4 weeks. Then what? He handed her a printout, an emergency census of ventilator-dependent kids across the Tri-County area. Numbers unspooled like a nightmare. Sarah stared, spine already tingling with the terrible answer she'd known since the Ann Arbor Charger. The corridor wasn't a one-time run. It had to become a bloodstream coursing through a continent hell-bent on clotting. Supply lines, caches, drivers, an underground artery delivering breath where Tariffs had sucked it away. She walked out to the ambulance bay where the Cadillac idled, panels dented, windshield spider-cracked, but silent drive still steady. Jax leaned against it, cigarette unlit between lips. He arched a brow. Figured you'd want to scrap her for parts. Not yet, Sarah replied. She scanned the skyline, smoke trails, solar glints, drone specks swirling. America was cannibalizing itself, but arteries could be rebuilt. Kids in Toledo need phenobarbital. Cincinnati's out of 4 fluids. We know the road now, Jax. We can map more. We can train crews. Jax exhaled, imaginary smoke curling. You do realize the LRF will double their bounties? Trump's lot might slap war profiteering charges on us, call us smugglers. Sarah shrugged, exhaustion and steel interwoven. They can call us whatever they like. My son called me Mama today. That's the only title I need. Brother Thomas stepped forward, touching the bullet crease on the fender. Amen, he said. Corridor for the living becomes corridor for the surviving. Maybe someday corridor for the thriving. Sarah offered a tired smile. First we refuel. Then we roll. In the distance a speaker truck blared presidential propaganda. Tariffs working, America first, victory imminent. But out beneath the loading dock awning, a dozen volunteers hoisted crates, marking destinations with spray-painted open-hand symbols, the icon born in a Cadillac showroom on a night of impossible resolve. Engines revved. Maps unfolded. Another convoy prepared to slice the darkness. The original Escalade's battery indicator chimed full. Sarah climbed behind the wheel again, heart fluttering like an exhausted bird yet somehow aloft. She looked at the road beyond the gate, battered, booby-trapped, hungry. Then she rolled forward, headlights off, embracing the dawn. The gray weeks that followed felt as if someone had lifted the city, shaken out everything soft, and set the jagged shell back down on a spinning plate. Sarah barely slept. When she did, dreams of Milo breathing free dissolved into flash cuts of fuel lines spewing fire, Union trebuchets hurling brake rotors, the Liberty Restoration Force Eagle swooping out of a gunmetal dawn. Yet every morning she pulled on grease-streaked scrubs and limped to the converted Cadillac showroom, now rechristened the Dispatch Cathedral, where map screens buzzed, radios hissed, and volunteers in scavenged Nike jackets queued for assignments. The corridor had mutated from a desperate dash into a latticework of arteries. What began as 2 battered Escalades and an improvised BMW Jammer was now 13 vehicles, 6 silent drive Cadillacs, 3 Tesla Cybertrucks rewired to run off swappable Powerwall pallets, a pair of ex-police BMW bikes with solar film saddlebags, and, because irony still loved the brave, a vintage Ford F-150 painted revolutionary red with a Louis Vuitton tarp stretched across the bed to shield 4 fluid crates from drone optics. Someone spray-painted a white open hand on every hood and called the emblem LIFELINE. Kids sketched it on sidewalks, a secret greeting. Adults carved it into PayPal kiosks whose touchscreens now served as town bulletin boards. But notoriety bred predators. President Trump's evening briefings, broadcast from a barricaded rose garden under floodlights bright enough to drown the teleprompter flicker, branded lifeline, an illegal tariff evasion cartel, and promised swift patriotic consequences. Liberty Restoration Force, eager for bigger bounties, rebranded itself Operation PatriotNet and rolled out Tesla-based hunter drones purchased off black market servers. Elon Musk, rumored captive in a Beijing tech compound one day and mastermind of a rogue Starlink constellation the next, became a ghost inside code. Some nights Sarah swore she could feel him watching through the skynets, toggling satellites 12 degrees just to keep a corridor shadowed long enough for her convoys to slip through. Detroit Mercy's pediatric floor stabilized. No small miracle. But cholera blooms along the Mississippi ballooned into full-scale plague. Dr. Abramovitz dashed a satchel of stool cultures and shouted above generator din. If St. Louis falls, Cincinnati croaks next, and this whole tariff-strangled interior turns medieval. So the map team plotted the farthest run yet. Detroit to St. Louis and back, 900 winding miles across rail spurs, dry canal beds, and a mid-route battery hub hidden in an abandoned Jack Daniels distribution plant outside Vincennes, Indiana. Whiskey barrels once destined for sports bars lay cracked like enormous eggs, but the solar roof still pulsed enough kilowatt-hours to swap 15 vehicles twice. Night before departure, Sarah stood amid the cathedral's mercury vapor glow, tracing the new corridor lines with a trembling finger. Jax leaned over her shoulder, voice a dry rustle. "You've run 8 missions in 32 days. The math says you'll run out of you before you run out of benzalkonium wipes." She almost laughed. "In another timeline, I'd be hunting Black Friday deals at CVS right now. In that timeline, the president tweets reality show spoilers instead of trade war ultimatums." He reached into an ammo crate, produced a half-pint of genuine Jack Daniels, rationed to medic-in-chief only. "No tossing this at Humvees. Swig, sleep 3 hours, then go be the engine again." They left at civil twilight under a drizzle fine as solder smoke. 10 vehicles this time. 4 Cadillacs packed with rehydration salts, 2 Tesla rigs refrigerated for vaccine ice, 3 BMW bikes as outriders, and Brother Thomas riding shotgun in the old Escalade, Bible duct taped to the dash where an airbag once lived. Milo, small but fiercer, insisted on handing his mother a pocket drawing before she climbed aboard. Stick figure pickups with FLNE symbols leaping over cartoon minds. "Drive over the bad dots," he said gravely. She kissed the crown of his hair and promised. Down through Ohio's spine they glided, tires chewing frost-crumbled tar. Near Lima, the convoy skirted a PayPal server farm gone feral. Wind whipping through smashed coolant towers, millions of frozen accounts still ticking inside steel silos. PatriotNet had set up a crypto-skimming brigade there, but Sarah's jammers spiked their RFID net long enough for the convoy to pass unseen. At dusk, they coasted under decrepit highway signage. "Trump tariffs mean jobs for America," someone had spray-painted beneath, "and graves for the rest." Brother Thomas bowed his head. Crossing into Indiana, the sky cracked open. Lake-effect blizzard rolling south like a tossed bedsheet. Visibility 0. Jax killed external lights. LiDAR guided them along abandoned fiber-optic trenches whose cable spools still radiated residual warmth, confusing thermal drones. Snow muffled engine whine. The world became a black and white film strip where only dashboard gels glowed faint neon. Half a mile from the Vincennes whiskey plant, they hit PatriotNet's new trick. Remote hijacked Tesla Sentry bots repurposed from showroom floors. 8 of them, matte black. No logos, 4-wheel skates pivoting with eerie ballerina grace. Each armed with coil gun pods scavenged from Walmart security stock. Sarah's front radar screamed. She shouted, "Box maneuver!" Over comms. Cadillacs formed a square, Cybertrucks inside. Brother Thomas flicked breakers on the prototype EMP cannon jacks, had rigged from old Cadillac ignition coils and scrap aluminum foil. At Sarah's mark, he triggered Pulse 1. Soundless blue ripple burst outward. First 3 bots seized, popped like toy cars tossed into a furnace. Plastic smoked, coil guns coughed sparks. But the remaining 5 stepped through the electromagnetic wash unscathed. PatriotNet had insulated them. They opened fire, tungsten flechettes shredding the lead Cadillac's hood. Battery alarms yowled. Coolant spattered like neon blood. Sarah gunned reverse, nearly colliding with a Tesla rig. A flechette sliced through her side mirror. Another through Brother Thomas's Bible, stopping at Exodus. Then Jax came barreling in on a BMW bike, strafing with a shoulder-slinged paintball marker loaded with high-vis flares and smoke dye. He rode circles around the bots, splashing luminescent violet that obscured targeting optics. Bots word confusion. EMP Pulse 2 fired. The rest froze mid-pivot, toppled like statues uprooted in revolution. Silence beneath the blizzard returned, broken only by Sarah's ragged inhale. They dragged carcasses off the road, coaxed the lead Cadillac's wounded battery with jumper cables, and limped into the Jack Daniels plant. Inside, the smell of charred oak and winter creosote mingled like forbidden incense. Solar arrays still pumped trickles into forklifts, jacks converted into rolling chargers. While batteries drank, volunteers pried copper windings from busted stills to solder new EMP shielding. Sarah sterilized flechette cuts on her door with leftover whiskey. Ironic, but antiseptic. At dawn, they rolled south again, but PatriotNet's radio chatter crackled renewed. They'd traced the pulse signature, triangulating intercept for Terre Haute. Sarah ran the calculus. Engage again on open highway and risk total losses, or ghost west along the Wabash River levees where ice jams forced convoys to crawling speed but drone trucks couldn't follow. River it was. All morning they crawled, electric wheels grinding over frozen silt, cadavers of shipping containers littering the floodplain like stranded leviathans. Brother Thomas quoted Noah with a wry edge. Sarah focused on Milo's oxygen stats ticking safe behind her eyelids. By mid-afternoon, drone swarms hemmed them anyway. PatriotNet had air superiority. So Sarah played her last card. She ordered Cadillac number 3, the one with redundant chassis rails, to ditch cargo and accelerate straight up the levee as decoy. Volunteer driver Tasha, a CVS pharmacist who had lost both parents to tariff medicine shortage, saluted once then punched throttle. The Cadillac burst through snow mist, dazzling white, drawing drones like moths. 5 miles out, a missile stitched through its rear battery. Magnesium fireball bloomed silent in the thin winter air. Tasha's sacrifice carved a hole wide enough for the remaining 9 vehicles to slip through the tree line and vanish. They reached St. Louis under broken red dusk. The gateway arch gleamed like a skeletal wishbone against storm clouds, floodwaters lapping at its feet where refugee shanties clung to metal ribs. Cholera camps ringed downtown stadiums. Generators moaned like wounded cattle. When Lifeline rolled up, a surge of hollow-eyed medics greeted them with the stunned relief of prisoners glimpsing parachutes. Rehydration salts disappeared into rows of 4 bags. Vaccine mist hissed over shivering toddlers. Sarah stitched, swabbed, coached, moving through triage like a woman underwater, each action propelled by borrowed kinetic grace. News of the convoy's arrival spread upstream faster than the river. Within hours, Kansas City broadcast pirate radio thanks. Memphis pledged shelter depots. Hashtags blossomed across decommissioned Twitter mirrors. Hashtag Corridor for Life. Hashtag Tariff Teardown. Even inside the White House, staffers leaked that Donald Trump had broken a crystal tumbler on hearing Lifeline's St. Louis touchdown. He ordered Treasury to freeze bank assets of any citizen aiding contraband generosity. PayPal, resurrected under emergency federal decree, pushed a forced update blocking transfers to zip codes along the corridor. Hacktivists responded by releasing open source code, turning outdated BMW infotainment systems into darknet relays. Within 24 hours, the corridor thrummed with encrypted traffic. But the return trip loomed. 500-plus miles of gauntlet carrying nothing but scar tissue nerves and a single cracked Cadillac hood emblem as memorial to Tasha. Road intel warned PatriotNet had repositioned to Fort Wayne, sealing the obvious rails. Sarah convened a midnight council in an abandoned Louis Vuitton boutique across from Busch Stadium. Shelves that once cradled $2,000 handbags now held ammonium nitrate crates and rolls of medical gaffer tape. North is suicide, Jax muttered around a solder iron. East is mind. We go over. Over what? A volunteer asked. Sarah pointed at the map. Lake Erie's frozen expanse glittering like blade glass. A straight shot from Sandusky to Windsor Ice Road. Canada's still embargoed, but Nurse Corps up there are stockpiling bronchodilators. We meet them Center Lake, swap cargo for fuel cells, loop to Detroit from the north. Brother Thomas crossed himself. That ice won't hold a Tesla rig. It will hold silent drive Cadillacs stripped to skeleton weight, Sarah answered. We lose a truck, we lose a truck. We lose Detroit's kids, we lose everything. No one argued. They repacked. Only medicine, lightweight solar blankets, compressed hydrogen bricks scavenged from wrecked BMW hybrids. PatriotNet surveillance drones swarmed highways next dawn. But Lifeline convoys were already slicing northeast, hugging county gravel where tire prints vanished under new snow. 2 days later, they rolled into Sandusky's ruins, headlights off, lake wind howling like wolves. The ice plain shimmered under quarter moon, cracked by fault lines that groaned with each gust. Sarah's breath plumed inside the cab, heater sacrificed to energy conservation. Jax fastened studded snow treads onto drive tires, 100 bolts ratcheting like castanets. At midnight, they inched onto Lake Erie, 12-inch ice flexing under 2-ton payloads. Temperature sat at -14 Fahrenheit. Calculations said they had 3 hours before microfractures spidered wide. Halfway across, comet tails of condensation revealed inbound motion. 3 Canadian snow rigs sporting Red Cross panels, escorted by muscular bombardier snowbikes piloted by Royal Ontario medics. When the rigs braked, ice split hairlines but held. The swap was ballet. Lifeline slid vaccine crates, cholera data sticks, the cracked Cadillac emblem for good luck. Canada passed over palletized nebulizer kits, newly printed inhalers, 20 Tesla grid cells charged off Niagara Hydro. A Canadian nurse, eyes brimming over NF-fortified goggles, pressed a maple syrup candy into Sarah's palm. "For Milo," she mouthed through mask layers. Sarah tried to thank her, but lungs seized with sudden sob. Words stuck. They parted fast. On the American side, a PatriotNet drone pack screamed low, heat-seeking. Ice splintered under its sonic boom. Jax floored the Cadillacs, studded tires clawing crystal. A drone missile struck behind, Fisher racing like lightning toward the rear vehicle. Brother Thomas, driving anchor, gun sideways, cutting the Fisher path, buying seconds for lead cars. His Escalade dropped into black water, tail lights glowing hellish red as they sank. Radio crackled one last scripture fragment before silence. Sarah bit her knuckle until blood came, never slowing. The remaining vehicles hit solid shore at dawn. Detroit's east suburbs flickered with ongoing skirmishes, but the convoy ghosted through alley mazes mapped by bike couriers. Nurse Ortega awaited, Milo bundled in patched Nike blanket, cheeks rosier than a fortnight earlier. He waved the maple candy proudly. Sarah handed him a brand new inhaler hot off Canadian printers. The hiss of first puff felt like thunder in her heart. Word of the Lake Run ignited underground networks. Lifeline became not a single corridor but a philosophy, a refusal. Kansas wheat farmers broadcast they were plowing frozen runways for drone drop medicine. Silicon Valley holdouts cracked PayPal's new firewall, rerouting funds through orphaned Bitcoin ledgers mined on orphaned gaming rigs. In New York, garment workers wove bullet-resistant Louis Vuitton fragments into pediatric vests stamped with white open hands. Even some BMW engineers inside captured plants leaked schematics for cold-weather silent drive upgrades. Human arteries regrew in the darkness. Inside Dispatch Cathedral, now ringed by sandbags and hydroponic lettuce towers, Sarah pinned a fresh map to the wall, latticed routes arcing all the way to the Carolinas and deep into Dakota fracking country. Jax tinkered with a downed PatriotNet drone, rewiring its guidance to follow LIFE-LINE transponders. Milo sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching new stick-figure convoys. Snow rigs, cybertrucks, helicopters dropping Nike logo care packs. He hummed an off-key lullaby he barely remembered from the old world. A presidential address crackled from a portable HAM. Donald Trump thundering about traitor medics and tariff righteousness, promising armored checkpoints on every interstate. People barely listened. They were busy soldering, coding, stitching, growing, driving. Tariffs could wall a nation off. They could not suffocate a pulse once it learned to reroute. That night, Sarah climbed the Cadillac's dented hood, stared at a skyline newly stippled with illegal wind turbines spinning like quiet prayers. She smelled faint Jack Daniels from a nearby wound-cleaning station, heard children's laughter echo between gutted tower shells, and for the first time since the April order, she let herself believe the country might still be worth the fight. Below, engines warmed on stealth idle, ready for dawn departures south, east, west, carrying breath in steel lungs. She slid into the driver's seat, Milo's drawing tape to the dash, and closed the door on the cold. Outside, the open hand emblem reflected moonlight, one pale shape against endless dark, but unmistakable and expanding.